Alcatel made some noise last year when they released the One-Touch Idol 3, the 5.5-inch version that is. The phone was one of many budget-friendly mid-rangers we saw throughout the year, but it remained relevant because of its solid performance and $250 starting costs. Well, they're not backing down this year either with its successor. There's been a lot of heated competition in this mid-range category, and we've seen a handful of offerings already. So it's going to need a lot to stay in the thick of things as we enter the second half of the year. Hey guys, John V here with Android Authority, and this is a review of the Alcatel Idol 4S. After a successful 2015, Alcatel's ambition to move forward is seen here with the phone. It's beautifully designed and far more premium in nature than last year's product, thanks to its glass meets metal construction. You can see it's somewhat similar to what Samsung has done with its phones, but the Idol 4S isn't as refined. It doesn't have the cohesiveness that we get from Samsung stuff, but it's still beautifully designed. Like, for example, there's a small lip, you don't really see it, but you definitely feel it, around the display where it kind of meets the metal trim bezel, and it does give the phone just a little bit of a sharper feel. It's not obtrusive or impedes the way you use the phone, but it just doesn't have that uniformity that we get from Samsung's designs. It features some interesting design choices. For starters, they surprise everyone by fashioning a fingerprint sensor on the back, which wasn't something we saw back during Mobile World Congress. The only issue though relates to how it's flush with the surrounding area, so I'm sometimes finding myself fiddling around just to find it. Well, it's not much of an issue when you have the included case on, just because the placement is a little bit more distinguishable. Secondly, it packs dual 3.6 watt JBL certified speakers that deliver impressive audio. They're powerful and sound clean, so we're impressed. You'll also notice that there are two grills on the back as well that helps in dispersing the audio to cover a wider range than those typically that are just fired towards the front. They're so powerful that they even have enough substance in the noisiest conditions. Take a listen for yourself. And lastly, there's the boom key, which is essentially a shortcut button on its side. It's tiny and it's also rather stiff, but to be frank, its placement is more appropriate for a power button. We now have Quad HD resolution with this 5.5-inch display. They've also switched to AMOLED as well. The display is actually the second most attractive thing with the phone. It's bright at over 600 nits, and it has all the qualities of AMOLED. However, the screen's on the colder side with its 7500 Kelvin color temperature, and it tends to produce oversaturated, unrealistic colors. That's not a bad thing, but it's not accurate or true to life either. But of course, all this can be modified to your liking just because you can manually set the color temperature through the display settings for either a warmer or colder tone. At the same time too, we notice that the screen isn't as responsive as we'd like when it comes to swipes. You really have to give a firm touch in order for it to register. It could be a latency issue of some kind, but it simply means that you can't be lazy with your swipes either. Like pulling down the notifications bar can be a hit or miss type thing, depending on how firmly you swipe down. One of the areas where it's going to be scrutinized a lot is in its processing performance. It comes equipped with a Snapdragon 652 chip with 3GB of RAM, which is more than plenty to handle the easy stuff. When it comes to other things, like gaming, it's something you might see hiccuping every now and then. For the average user, they'll probably be content with its performance, but for those who are more demanding, its weaker processing performance compared to today's flagships limits its ability to do more. Well, at the very least, Alcatel is generous in giving it 32GB of internal storage with the expansion via microSD. Alcatel's Android experience is a likable one at the very least, since it tries its best to remain faithful to the stock experience. Basic users will appreciate its simplicity and straightforwardness, but power users will be craving for more. It's more like a one-step process with the experience here on the Idol 4S, just because you're focused on doing one thing at a time, whereas say something like TouchWiz, you have all these features and functions at your disposal. They do, however, continue to offer Alcatel's reversible mode. While some might see this as a novelty, it doesn't have any negative implications to the experience. Hey, it just means that you don't have to worry about picking up the phone, because regardless if you pick it upside down, the interface will adapt. The question that remains though is if it'll get the next version of Android in a timely manner. This year's camera gets bumped up to 16 megapixels and uses a Sony sensor, while the front one is still at 8 megapixels but receives a wider f2.0 aperture lens. For the most part, the camera gets the job done, so we can't complain. Details are sufficient and colors tend to be rich in tone. However, it struggles with dynamic range as brighter lit areas tend to be overexposed. That's solved by using HDR, which adjusts the exposure throughout the range, but then it appears a bit artificial, and there's no automatic HDR mode either. Its weakest area continues to be low light, since images tend to be grainy and more susceptible to blurring. The front camera works rather well, producing enough details and color to the mix. 4K video capture is offered with the camera as well. It's a delightful option for those who need the extra resolution to work with. And just like its still shot performance, video quality is in the same range. It's good when the conditions are ideal, but isn't one for low light situations. On top of that, the electronic image stabilization doesn't seem to do much as well, since shakiness is still apparent. As for the camera app itself, you have all the staple modes like panoramic, HDR, and slow motion. You also have added treats like micro video, which is an editing feature for short clips, as well as Fuse that adds a parallax-esque like effect to give images a more interactive look. They're all neat, but we really wish that the manual mode also worked for video. Nope. It's only good for photos. Call quality is surprisingly great with this one. The volume output is pretty strong through the earpiece and also on the speakerphone, but it's made better with the clear tones of its quality. Voices have strong emphasis, which makes it even a breeze to chit-chat when there's some ambient noise around. We're also impressed by its better than average battery life, which is attributed to the 3000 mAh battery. In general, we're able to get an easy 1.5 days of normal usage out of it. Now that'll vary depending on the user, but even if you're the demanding type, its charging time is at a speedy 89 minutes. And that, folks, is what we call quick charging. So while it doesn't claim that title of being the best of the best when it comes to battery life, it's still on par to what we see with all the other flagships out there. Alcatel isn't just selling a phone here. Instead, they're selling an experience because when you buy it, it'll be bundled with a VR headset, so out of the box, literally, you can experience VR. That's a sweet gesture made better by the fact that they're also including a pair of JBL headphones, a screen protector, and an Incipio case. All this is awesome to include with the purchase, especially when this unlocked dual SIM smartphone is only $400 when it launches on August 3rd. Yes, if you pre-order it beforehand, you'll get an additional discount to drop it down to only $350, but it's still competing with some other aggressively priced smartphones at around the same cost. Phones like the OnePlus 3 and the ZTE Axon 7 come to mind at the $400 mark, but then you also have even cheaper things like the $250 Moto G4 Plus to think about. While it'll see a price reduction sometime in the future, here now it's playing to a tough audience that has a lot to choose from. Last year's starting price of $250 was undeniably head-turning with the One Touch Idol 3, but now at $400 with the Idol S, it's tougher to like. That's unless its design and batch of goodies are enough to seduce you. Everything about the phone is an upgrade from last year, from the design to the specs. I definitely like it, but at $400, it really causes you to think more about what you want to buy. So if you guys want to learn more about this handset, you can check out our website, androidauthority.com. This is John V, signing out.